everybody, and welcome into my Week 9 college football pick'em. These games are based on ESPN's college football pick'em game. It is Halloween weekend. It's a hectic weekend where I'm at, so I'm going to zip through this because I've got a lot to do, but we're going to give each game its deserved attention. But let's get into it. First up, we've got number 2 Ohio State versus number 13 Penn State. This is the much beloved big noon kickoff on Fox. Let's take a look at Ohio State. We know all about them. They're one of the finest offenses in the country. They average nearly 50 points a game, over 500 yards per game. This is a tough task for Penn State. They've got a lot of weapons at the receiver position, even with Jackson Smith and Jigba being not 100%, and CJ Stroud. He could drop it in a bucket from 100 yards away. He is an incredibly accurate quarterback, really great talent all around. This defense is also putting up good numbers as they're hitting their stride with new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. They rank top 5 in the nation in scoring defense and in yards allowed per game, so that's definitely great numbers. Looking at the Nittany Lions, they recovered last week against Minnesota after just getting pancaked against Michigan 2 weeks prior. This offense is averaging 33.4 points per game and 423 yards per game. Last week, quarterback Sean Clifford, who's in like his 10th year there, he had his best game of the season, and he needs to replicate that. I would say he needs to have that good of a performance, if not even better, against the Buckeyes if Penn State's going to have a shot in this one. They really have to make the most of their offensive possessions. On the defensive side of the ball, new defensive coordinator Manny Diaz has been known for dialing up the blitz. That could be significant if they can get pressure on Stroud. I think that would be a big edge. Although the front seven for the Nittany Lions is not as full of as many big-time names or big-time playmakers as we are used to in the past, particularly with the front seven. If we look at their ability to stop the run, that was a big struggle point against Michigan. Now, Ohio State would typically think of Stroud and those receivers. They also have an ability to run the ball as well, as they have shown in the past, so this could be dangerous for Penn State if Ohio State can get the ground game going. But the secondary for Penn State, Joey Porter Jr., Jair Brown, other experienced, really talented players, really corners that are really pestilent and really can cause problems for opposing teams' receivers. If that secondary, we're going to see what they're made of against Ohio State. That's the matchup to look for. But then if Ohio State can run the ball effectively, Penn State will not stand much of a chance. According to ESPN's Football Power Index, Ohio State has a 79.6% chance to win this game. I'm going to take Ohio State to win the game. I think they're a more talented team, but I think Penn State will keep it closer than people are expecting. I think the line is at about 15 points, so I think Penn State will keep it within that margin. Let's take a look at this next game, Notre Dame versus number 16 Syracuse. This one is a noon kick on ABC. Notre Dame, we all know it, they're down this year. All the Notre Dame haters are absolutely loving it, and I don't blame you. I'm kind of loving it too. Offense is averaging 26.6 points per game and 386 yards per game. There's nothing high-powered about this offense. Nobody jumps off the page there. They've got a pretty decent tight end, but that's about it. On the defensive side of the ball, they're allowing 21.9 points per game and 340 yards per game. The defense is on the better side of the ball. They haven't played terrible this year, but they're going to have to stop the run and Sean Tucker if they're going to be effective in this one. I think if you look at it, it's really going to come down to the trenches, and Notre Dame that's one of their stronger suits in terms of offensive line and defensive line, and Syracuse has been effective at doing that as well. Let's look at the Orange now. They had a tough loss last week against Clemson. They were really taking it to them in the first half. They just stalled in the second half. They couldn't score any more points, and you got to score if you're going to beat a team like Clemson. They're averaging 34 points per game and 412 yards per game, including 179 rushing yards per game. As I mentioned, that's mostly Sean Tucker. He's really been a big motor for the Orange on offense. The defensive side of the ball are holding opponents to 15.1 points per game and under 300 yards per game. Like I mentioned, I don't think Notre Dame has a big high-powered offense. This is not going to be a high-scoring game. It's not going to be a big, shootout type game. It's going to be decided in the trenches. It's going to be decided with physical play. FPI says Syracuse, 60.7% chance to win. I like that. I'm going to take Syracuse to get the win here. I'm not familiar with the point spread, but I'll take Syracuse. Southern versus Jackson State. This is 2 p.m. on ESPN3. Game day is going to be at this one. This is a big game for HBCUs. I apologize. I don't really know much about either of these programs or any of how their seasons are going, and I know that Deion Sanders is the coach for Jackson State, and who doesn't love a little bit of prime time? I know that Deion's son is the quarterback for Jackson State, and he has put up some good numbers, and he's got an arm, and he can really sling it. So I'm going to take Jackson State in this one to get the win. I think this is great exposure for both of these schools, and I think there's a lot of pageantry and history here, but I'll take Jackson State to get the win just based off prime time. Enough said. All right, let's turn to this one in the 3:30 slot on Fox. Number 9, Oklahoma State versus number 22, Kansas State. Oklahoma State These are two really different styled offenses here. Oklahoma State is one that can really sling the ball all over the field. Quarterback Spencer Sanders, he's a very veteran guy in this offense. He knows how to run it. And Kansas State, conversely, their offense is really run the ball heavy. I think if they get in a situation where they need to throw the ball and they have to ask Adrian Martinez to step up and make those throws, I don't think that he is able to do that, and I think that could fall apart for them. However, if he's able to throw the ball effectively against anyone, it's going to be against Oklahoma State. Their secondary is a big liability. They allow the most passing yards per game, I think, of anybody in the Big 12, but I don't have the exact number in front of me. But like I said, Kansas State, they are very effective at running the ball. Deuce Vaughn, I think, is still the back there. So they are able to establish a line of scrimmage and get the ball moving. That would be a big point of dominance for Kansas State. They're also holding opponents to under 20 points per game. I'd be surprised if they did that against Oklahoma State. According to the Football Power Index, though, they like Oklahoma State with a 54.1% chance to win this game. I'm going to take the Cowboys here. I think that this one could potentially get out of hand, not in terms of a blowout, but in the sense that Oklahoma State will, have such a large margin that Kansas State might struggle to keep up, so to speak. I don't think Kansas State has the offensive firepower to hang with them, but that's why they play the games. We'll see, but I'm going to take the Cowboys for now. Moving to a little Big Ten West action, it's number 17 Illinois, and how about some claps for Illinois here? They played very well on the season. Brett Bielema has got this program trending in the absolute right direction, and speaking of programs trending in the wrong direction, it's Nebraska. This one's a 3:30 game on ABC. Illinois, they're one of the best in the Big Ten West. I believe they're first in the Big Ten West, so if they can make it to Indy, which I know we're still about probably a month out from really having those serious conversations, but this is where the games that kind of decide who's going to be in that picture at the end of the year. That would be a huge feat for the Illini. They play very physical. Their defense is definitely the highlight of this team, I'd say, but their run game, they average nearly 200 yards per game on the ground, and they hold opponents on the defensive side of the ball to less than 10 points a game. That's one of the top scoring defenses in the country. Nebraska, they're just currently in limbo. They fired Scott Frost earlier this year, and I think that the interim has come in, and he's done a good job at sort of rallying the troops. They had a little 2-game win streak there, but the defense has been absolutely atrocious. They are last in the Big Ten in points per game and yards per game. We usually don't see Illinois put up big points or big numbers offensively, but I think if they're going to do it against anybody, it's this sorry Nebraska defense. I'll take Illinois to get this win, and ESPN's Football Power Index likes the Illini as well. Looking at number 20, Cincinnati versus UCF. This one's a 3:30 game on ESPN. This one has big stakes in the American Athletic Conference title race. Cincinnati, they stumbled week 1 against Arkansas. I think a lot of people maybe took their eyes off the Bearcats, but they have rebounded and they've looked well, but they have looked vulnerable. They've had some close margins in the last couple of weeks, and I think if there's any team that could capitalize on that in the American, it's definitely UCF. But look out for Cincinnati's defense. Their offense is not what it was last year. Obviously, they get rid of Desmond Ridder. They lose guys like Jerome Ford. They're going to have less of that firepower, but the defense has really stepped up and they've played well. They're top 3 in the American in points per game and yards per game allowed. So they're very putting up good numbers on the defensive side of the ball, but that'll be a big test against a UCF offense. UCF kind of laid an egg last week. They fell short, I believe, against East Carolina. It's just not really the performance you wanted after you put 70 on Temple. But their offense has amazing numbers, 500 yards per game, but only 37.3 points per game. So you look at a team like Ohio State that's averaging 500 yards a game, but they can put up more like 50 points a game. So you wonder where that kind of disparity is coming from. On the defensive side of the ball, they're also the top scoring defense in the conference, and they're top 3 in yards allowed per game. So both of these teams have good defenses, but I'm going to take the UCF Golden Knights because I believe that their offense is better. John Rice Plumlee at quarterback, he can run the ball, he can throw the ball, he's a really dynamic player, and I don't know if that'll be too much for Cincinnati to handle, so I'm going to take UCF to get the win at home. Moving on now to some SEC East action. It's Missouri versus number 25, South Carolina. Missouri, they've struggled as of late. The offense averaging 24 points per game. The defense is allowing 23.1 points per game. So that's pretty much the same number. So really they can't consistently outscore the defense on an average basis. So they did just make it through a real grit of their schedule. So we'll see if that, iron sharpening iron kind of came into play at all. And for South Carolina, my description is it's Cocktober. That is all. I'm taking the Gamecocks to win this one. ESPN's Football Power Index likes them too, giving them a 68.2% chance to win this game. It's Cocktober. They haven't lost in Cocktober. They had a huge win last week against Texas A&M at home. I think they're trending in the right direction. They're playing Beamer ball. They're playing great. So it's Cocktober, and you can't bet against the Gamecocks, and that's in Cocktober. Moving on. More SEC East action. Number 19, Kentucky versus number 3, Tennessee. Okay. Kentucky, they run very slow offense. Tennessee, they run one of the fastest offenses. That is what it's going to come down to. Will Levis, his health has been questionable. They were starting off really well. They fell to Ole Miss. He got hurt. They haven't been the same since. They've really cooled off. They need to play an A+++ level game, especially from Will Levis, because they don't have a run game at this moment. The run game has really been absent. Chris Rodriguez had that 4-game suspension to start the year. He hasn't really found his stride yet, and that's been a big struggle. If your offense is not dynamic, you are not going to be able to succeed, because teams will just figure you out and you'll be in trouble. But they still have played well. Kentucky still has talent. But it'll really come down to, I think, if their defense can slow down Tennessee, and more importantly, if their offense can establish long, methodical drives, they can keep moving the chains and keep the Volunteers off the field, because you don't want to let that Volunteers offense back on the field. This is the best season that Tennessee has had in my lifetime. That either speaks to how mediocre Tennessee has been for my life or how young I am. I'll let you figure that one out. The offense is averaging 571 yards per game and 50.1 points per game on offense. Those are both first in the country. Quarterback Hendon Hooker is him. That is all. He has played his way into the Heisman conversation, and this was a dude who just transferred in from Virginia Tech. Nobody really knew his name, but everybody knows his name now. He is absolutely playing amazing ball, but it doesn't really matter. The defense, they've been on a lower level. They haven't put up as stellar numbers, but it doesn't matter when you have that offense that can outscore almost anybody in the country. ESPN's Football Power Index likes Tennessee big. They give them an 82.9% chance to win this game. I'm going to take Tennessee to win. It's at home, on Rocky Top. They've got new goalposts, so they're rocking, they're rolling. They have got all the momentum in the world. They've got a huge game next week, but we don't want to look ahead. We're talking about Kentucky right now. I think they have enough to beat Kentucky, and I'd like to see a good game here, but I don't know what the margin's going to be like. I can't really comment on that. I haven't looked into it enough. Okay, moving on. More SEC action. It's number 15 Ole Miss versus Texas A&M, 7:30 p.m. on SEC Network. Ole Miss, they started off well last week. It looked like they were going to really do their thing against LSU, but then they just fell apart. They just left. They didn't come out of their locker room in the second half. This could be an easy rebound week, though. Their key to victory here: score more than 31 points. Ole Miss is perfectly capable of that with their offensive weapon and the offensive schemes that Lane Kiffin draws up. If you score more than 31, you're going to have a good shot at beating A&M. They've only done that. They've only scored 31 once this season, and that was against Sam Houston State in Week 1. So if that tells you anything. So I'm not even worried about Ole Miss's defense, because let's turn to Texas A&M's offense. They're a mess. They're light years away from the preseason expectations, and maybe that just speaks to the preseason expectations, but this is not good. This is not what the recruits, this is not what the fans, this is not what anybody hoped for. They're dressing up as zombies for Halloween on offense because they're absolutely lifeless. Like I mentioned, they've barely even scored over 30 points all year, only one time against an FCS school. They can't score the ball, they can't move the ball. Quarterback has been a revolving door. They're not playing up to level, not playing up to expectations at all. The defense, though, this is their hope. If the defense can keep the game close and force some turnovers or force some mistakes on Ole Miss's end, A&M will have a shot. So A&M's not totally dead in the water. I don't want to bury them at all. As we can see, the Football Power Index likes Ole Miss, 57.8% chance. So that's not a huge lean towards Ole Miss. But the defense, they've got to keep it low scoring. They've got to keep it within reach of their offense, because if this game goes over 30 points, I don't think A&M can hang. So I'm going to take Ole Miss to get the win in this one. I think they've got more offensive firepower, especially in their running game. But A&M, it could absolutely be the case where if they can keep this close, they can force some errors, kind of what we saw against Arkansas, they can sneak out of here with a win. And our last game of this 10-week pick'em, this is going to be the shortest video I've ever done. Stanford versus number 12 UCLA, 10:30 p.m. ESPN, some Pac-12 after dark. Stanford, they're building some slight momentum. I think they've won about 2 games in a row, so who knows. But David Shaw, he's got such a nice gig, Private university, he makes lucrative amounts of money for being, the coach of let's just say an average football team right now. They're averaging 25.1 points per game and less than 400 yards per game. They failed to score over 20 in their last 2 games, so definitely no sort of offensive machine here at all. This defense is allowing more points per game than the offensive averages, so for those of you unfamiliar, that's not a good thing. They need to control the time of possession here, and they need to keep UCLA off the field. Kind of a similar approach, I'd say, to Kentucky. They've got to control the game, run the ball, control the clock, and you want to keep DTR and this offense off the field. Because turning now to the Bruins, they are on a roll this season. I know Oregon kind of handled them last week, but I still like their pieces. I still like what Chip Kelly's doing here. They're averaging nearly 40 points per game and close to 500 yards per game on the offensive side of the ball. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, a.k.a. DTR written there, he has a top 10 QBR in the country, and the run game for UCLA is rocking with Zach Charbonnet. The defense is allowing 25.9 points per game and 373 yards per game. The Football Power Index likes UCLA in this one with a 78.1% chance to win. I'm going to take the Bruins to get the win at home, sort of a bounce-back game after kind of a disappointing performance maybe for some against Oregon. So I'm going to take UCLA to get this one. I think they'll win it handily. I want to give a thanks for all of you who watched and tuned into this one for some reason, and all stats and info courtesy of ESPN. So thanks for them for providing that information. But as you can see, I didn't really rely as much on stats and info, and I kind of just try to talk faster and go off basic feel. If you like this, comment below, and I'll kind of do this style more. It was definitely easier with my schedule. But hope you all enjoy your college football weekend, and I hope your favorite team wins, unless, of course, they're playing my team. And have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you back here next week.